So we're going to be learning about scales, and this is going to come in 5 basic parts. The first part is going to be the tetrachords and how those can build onto scales. We're going to start manipulating the tetrachords. Then we're going to be talking about increasing tempo, and then we're going to go through adding more octaves. So not just the original first octave, but doing more octaves. And then the super advanced level is adding octaves that aren't as usual for your instrument. Finally, we'll go into doing the exact same thing with chromatic scale. Let's first talk about what scales are. Scales are the foundation of all of Western music. That's what we call this part of the world, which means North America and Europe. This goes from everything from Beethoven to Billie Eilish. Everything that we know is based on this kind of scale. Let's hear it on a really out-of-tune piano. Scales are so important because if you can do really good on your scales on your instrument, you can play almost any music. That's why we use this as a foundation. Scales are kind of like the alphabet is to English class, or like maybe formulas are to math class or science class. This is the basis of what we form all of our music on. A couple things you need to get started on scales. Number 1, your instrument. Number 2, you'll need a metronome. You don't need an old school metronome like this one, of course. You can find a metronome app on your device or your parents' device. There are plenty of free metronome apps out there that you can find. Or if you don't want to do that, you can go to google.com and just type in metronome. And when you hit enter, there will be a metronome that comes up at the top of the page, and you just move the slider to your tempo. Now that is not as advanced, and you can't do what we call subdividing, which we can learn about later. So in that case, what I recommend, and the best app for everybody to have in band, is an app called Tonal Energy. That app is going to be great for all of band, and that's what everybody uses. In high school, in college, professionals, everybody uses that. It does cost a little bit of money, but it's much cheaper than buying a metronome somewhere, and it also includes an amazing tuner. The other thing you're going to need is some kind of music. You can find that in your book or your binder or any of your supplies that we already have. Finally, you're going to need a fingering chart. Again, find that in your book or your binder, but also if you can't, or maybe you've lost it or misplaced it, just Google in your instrument and fingering chart, and you'll be able to find one. As we go through this video, I want you to understand that we are going to start at the basics, and then we're going to go through all the way to learning scales onto like the collegiate level. So if you are a beginning band or a first year student, please, once we get through the first portions of this, stop the video and start your work. If you are an advanced student and looking at this video, go ahead and watch the whole thing through so you understand the process. So when you start on a scale because you're gonna get impatient, then you can know, I'm not doing this well because I'm not following the process. Then you can go back and figure out where you need to do something again to make that particular scale or that group of scales better. This is an example of the tetrachord Titan page in the Musical Mastery book. So when we look at these, this is a scale. As a whole, this is one scale. And I know this is the page for trumpet, and this is in treble clef, but everything here applies to every instrument. As we see, we have a left side 4 notes and a right side 4 notes. This scale starts on the note A. So this would be the A scale. Or as we go forward, we'll call this the A major scale. There are A minor scales, which we can get to further down the road. You first start by figuring out what the 4 notes are on the left side, and you play these 1 note at a time, 1 foot tap at a time. I say you need to start at 60 beats per minute on the metronome. Start that at that tempo and just play these notes with each and every foot tap. Once you have the left 4 notes, do the same thing with the right 4 notes and do those separately. Finally, when you feel confident that you can do the left side and then separately the right side, let's put them together with an out and then an in breath in between. Doing the left side and then the right side at 60 beats per minute with every single note perfect and no mess ups means that you can do a single time tetrachord tighten. If you can complete the entire page in single time and double time, you are ready to move on to the next part. The next part of this is learning your scales, and this is what we call scale pattern. If we look at the last scale on the tetrachords, we started on this low note A and then went up every single note. We had A, B, C sharp, D, and then on the right side we had E, F sharp, G sharp, A. If we move to the next page, you'll notice we have the same notes here. A, B, C sharp, D. Then we have the same next 4 notes. E, F sharp, G sharp, A. The difference here is the rhythm has changed. Now we start with a half note and then move on to quarter notes until we get back to what we call the root note, the main note. This is A, and then when we reach A again, we play another half note, and then we go back down, and then we play a longer note at the very end to know that we're done, and this is a 4-beat whole note. At 60 beats per minute, which is always the start, we begin with a long note, go up the scale, a long note again, down the scale, and a long note. That is called the scale pattern. You can do this with all 12 of the major scales. I just want to point out that for some of you, it says trumpet A, concert G major. That's because this is translating to band language from your instrument language. Remember, concert from our lessons before means the whole band language. So that's just a translation there, so you'll know when we get into full band. The next step is going to be speeding up. This is a technique that you can do with anything that you are trying to speed up. You first start with whatever tempo you can do that thing perfectly. So we're going to start at 60 beats per minute. And then in one practice section with a small section, so if this is a piece of music, maybe 4 measures. If this is a scale, maybe half the scale, maybe the full scale. We're going to start at 60, and then we're going to play it perfectly. Once we play that perfectly, we are going to play it at 62 beats per minute. Your brain is not going to be able to tell the difference between 60 and 62. So you're going to be able to play it perfect at 62. And then you play it at 64 beats per minute. Then 66, and you keep on going up. Now we have played this 10 times. If we started at 60 beats per minute and then jumped up immediately to 80 beats per minute, we might find that that is too hard of a jump. So we start at 60 and go up slowly. That means you can get 10 repetitions in and be able to play it even that much more perfectly when you get to 80 beats per minute. Let's say that I was doing it great at 80 beats per minute. You can keep on going on until you find out that you can't do it. Then you back off just a little bit and you'll know that's where you can resume the next day. Or maybe this was a really hard thing for you. So maybe on that particular scale, you can only make it to 70. Well, then you will know that that's where you start off. That's why it's really good to go ahead and write on your page or record in a notebook what you're playing and how fast you can play it. Now for day 1, we did 60 beats per minute to 80 beats per minute. The next day, don't immediately start at 80 beats per minute. A cool trick is going to be to start it at 70 beats per minute, or half in between where you started the previous day and where you ended the previous day. And then you'll be able to blow past 80 and get up even further until you can't do it any further. Then the next day, start at 80 and go all the way up to maybe 100. Wherever this is, remember, if you mess up, that doesn't count. You have to go back in tempo. You can't keep on going if it's not perfect. And this is an easy way to jump up anything in music faster and faster, very slowly. So in this example, say this was a really hard thing that we could do, and every time we went to what we might call the point of failure on each of these parts, then this took us 5 days to be able to go and double the speed from 60 beats per minute all the way to 120 beats per minute. Now that we have mastered and played perfectly our 1 octave scales at a tempo 60 beats per minute and then double time, which would be 120 beats per minute, you're starting to get to the point where you can go on to the next level. The next part of this is learning multiple octaves. Now, in your instrument, there are some octaves that are easier to start with than others. In the musical mastery packets, in the sections in your binder, you can see that you have a 2 octave section. This does not list all 12 scales, but it does list most of the scales that you can play at 2 octaves. There are even some instruments that can do 3 octaves. This is the same kind of scales. You start on a note that's long, you move up, and you go to the next one. If you're at the 2 octave part of this, you can already play this at 120 beats per minute. Moving to 2 octaves, it takes a lot of time. This might be after a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months of work. This is where you can get to working on 2 octaves, and that's okay. Slow is going to be better at this point. Once you learn this next part, it's the same letters going up and going forward as you're going on to the second story or the second octave of this scale. Remember, when you're going on really high stuff or really low stuff, you have to play relaxed and have a good embouchure the entire time. Never force anything. If something's too high, then you can't get up that high yet, and you need to work on that. Slowly, 1 note at a time. Do the same thing on these scales and practice at 60 beats per minute, starting off, maybe even slower if you need to, and then work to 120 beats per minute or beyond. Now we can talk about adding 2 octave scales to other scales that might be really advanced. Now I'm going to go ahead and tell you this is an advanced technique that is only for kids that are maybe moving on into high school or who've played a lot of these scales already. This is probably after a year's worth of working on these scales or more can you start getting to this area. Always, always, always remember to be relaxed and have a good embouchure. If you feel that your embouchure's too tight or your mouth is getting tired when you play, you need to stop. You are going to hurt yourself and you are going to end up making you sound bad. We have to sound good no matter what we play. How do we add multiple octaves? Well, you just need to go through and figure out what the letters are, look in your fingering chart, and see if those notes are possible on your instrument. If you can go up to those notes, then it's possible, even if it's not written on the page. If you know what these scales are and what these notes are going forward, you're gonna know what more are. So let's say that we didn't have these listed on this page. Well, you can go ahead and figure out the fingerings for these and make that happen. This is probably more true for the brass instruments because there are theoretically no limits to what you can play. It's just what is physically possible for your muscles and your body. Woodwind instruments, there are some advanced alternate fingerings for super high or super low notes. You can try to find those on the internet just by Googling instrument name and then fingering chart. It's very possible that they don't exist. Percussionists, you need to be playing all of your scales at 2 or 3 octaves depending on the size of your instrument. The last thing I want to talk about today is your chromatic scale. The chromatic scale is the second big heavy part of this. There are 12 major scales and then the chromatic scale. I feel like they carry equal weight because the chromatic scale is how you figure out every single note on your instrument. The best way to do that is looking in your musical mastery book, and there is a chromatic page that separates into groups. Groups, you take a breath, and then you do the next group. You take a breath, and then this is the combination of the first two things. Then we have the next part, 3 notes plus 3 notes, add them together to have 6 notes. This line here is a combination of this line and then this line without stopping. As you go down the page, this section is the same thing that we did here. Now we're just starting to go backwards and then to go down. When we get to the end, we can go up and then down. As you move through and as you accomplish this, remember to do the same techniques using tempo. Do not move on without doing anything perfect. Then you cannot move on. If you can accomplish your 1 octave chromatic scale, then move on and add more notes below or above it using your fingering chart. Your fingering chart is the best resource on the chromatic scale. I hope this video gives you a good overview of scales and how they work and how to learn them. Scales are the biggest thing in music. It's the foundation and it's how to get good.